I have always prided myself on two things: my career as the lead investigator for Sterling Assurance, and the orderly, seemingly perfect family I came home to every night. My life was a carefully constructed edifice, built on a foundation of truth. My job was to dismantle the architecture of lies, to find the single rotten beam that would bring a fraudulent claim crashing down. I was a connoisseur of deceit, an expert in spotting the subtle tells, the flicker of an eye, the tremor in a voice that betrayed a falsehood. Ironic, then, that I was completely blind to the rot that had infested my own foundation. It was a Thursday night, the kind of unremarkable evening that precedes a life-altering storm. I'd stayed late at the office, burying myself in the minutiae of a complex arson case. The paperwork was a comfortable labyrinth, a place where facts were facts and every effect had a traceable cause. By 9, my mind was buzzing, and my body was coiled with a restless energy that only a hard workout could unwind. The company gym was my sanctuary, a sterile space of clanking metal and rhythmic humming that muted the noise of the world. It was nearly empty, just the way I liked it. The scent of rubber and clean sweat filled the air as I moved through my weight routine, each repetition a small, satisfying victory. An hour later, muscles burning with a pleasant ache, I headed for the locker room. I was rounding the corner, toweling the sweat from my neck, when I heard the voices. One was unmistakable. Grant, a risk assessment manager with a laugh that always sounded a little too loud for any room. The other was Owen from accounting. "Poor Elias," Grant said, and it was followed by that booming chuckle. The sound made the blood in my veins turn to ice. "Guy's the best investigator in the company, and he has no clue his own wife has been screwing Julian Croft for months." I stopped dead. The world tilted on its axis. My gym bag, heavy with the day's burdens, slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. It hit the tiled floor with a dull thud, a sound that seemed to echo in the cavernous silence that followed Grant's words. The voices inside went quiet. "Who's there?" Owen asked, his voice a nervous squeak. For a heartbeat, I considered turning back. I could have walked away, pretended I hadn't heard, and allowed the poison to fester in the dark. But that wasn't me. I was a man who ran toward the fire, not away from it. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a mask of casual indifference, and stepped around the corner. "Just me," I said, my voice unnervingly steady. I nodded at them both. "Forgot my watch." "Oh." The look on their faces was all the confirmation I needed. Grant's eyes widened with a comical horror, his mouth hanging slightly ajar. Owen became intensely interested in the knot of his shoelaces, as if it were the most complex puzzle he'd ever encountered. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "Elias, man, Grant started, his voice a strained whisper. I held up a hand, a gesture that was both a dismissal and a command. "Save it." With movements that felt detached, as if I were watching a character in a film, I walked to my locker. My hands were steady as I spun the combination lock. I retrieved the simple steel watch from the shelf, slipped it onto my wrist, and closed the locker door with a soft click. Then I turned to face them, two men trapped in the harsh fluorescent light of their own carelessness. "So," I began, the single word hanging in the air, "Serafina and Julian Croft." They exchanged a panicked glance. Owen nodded reluctantly, a tiny jerky movement of his head. "How long?" My voice was quiet, devoid of the hurricane of rage and pain that was tearing me apart from the inside. Grant couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at a point on the wall just over my shoulder. "About 6 months, from what we've heard. Look, Elias, most of us, we thought you knew, that you were just dealing with it privately. 6 months, 180 days of lies. Half a year of coming home to my wife, Serafina, of kissing her, of sleeping beside her, of listening to her talk about her day selling real estate, all while she was secretly meeting that smug bastard from the legal department. The shared jokes, the intimate touches, the life we had built, was it all a performance? Who else knows?" I asked, the question dropping into the silence like a stone. It was Owen who answered, his voice barely audible. "Everyone." "Oh." The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. Everyone. All those sympathetic glances in meetings I had mistaken for professional respect. The abrupt silences when I entered the break room. The knowing smirks from Julian whenever we passed in the hallway, which I had always dismissed as simple arrogance. They hadn't just known, they'd been watching. My private humiliation had been their office spectator sport, a sick reality show unfolding in real time. "Anything else I should know?" I asked, surprised by my own composure. Grant shifted uncomfortably. "They were at the Millbrook Hotel last Friday. when you were in Dallas for that deposition. Julian was bragging about it in the men's room. The Millbrook, the boutique hotel where Sarah and I had spent our 5th wedding anniversary. The memory, once beautiful, was now hideously tainted. What did he say? I insisted, my voice deadly quiet. Grant hesitated, looking at Owen for support that wasn't there. Grant sighed, a sound of pure misery. He said she was insatiable, that she complained you were always too tired or too busy, that she needed a real man who could satisfy her. Each word was a knife twisting in my gut. 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, reduced to sordid locker room gossip. The mother of my children, portrayed as some desperate, sex-starved housewife. I absorbed the information as I would facts from a case file, compartmentalizing the pain, filing away the details. I gave a single, sharp nod. Thanks for the intel, gentlemen. As I turned to leave, Grant called after me. Elias, what are you going to do? I looked back at him, my expression a perfect neutral mask. What I do best, I replied, investigate. The drive home was a blur. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I navigated the familiar Houston streets on autopilot. My mind, the one tool I had always trusted, was a battlefield of warring questions. How had I missed this? Was our entire marriage a lie? What about the children, Caleb and Maya? Had Sarah and Julian laughed about me together? A memory surfaced with sickening clarity, the company Christmas party 3 months ago. Sarah had worn a stunning red dress that hugged her curves, drawing appreciative glances. I'd been proud. Now I wondered, had she worn it for him? I remembered her disappearing for nearly 20 minutes. I'd assumed she was in the ladies' room. Bile rose in my throat as other, uglier possibilities emerged. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial we'd called home for a decade, a decision had solidified. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. That's what she would expect. An emotional outburst, accusations, tears, that would give her the upper hand. I needed to be strategic. I needed evidence. I needed to be the predator, not the prey. I cut the engine and sat for a moment in the darkness, staring at the warm light spilling from the windows. Through the living room window, I could see her moving around, the picture of domestic tranquility. The woman I had loved for 15 years, a stranger. I took a deep breath, slipped my wedding ring into my pocket, and stepped out of the car. The investigation had begun. Daddy. The moment I opened the door, my 7-year-old princess Maya launched herself at me. I caught her in a practice motion, spinning her around, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. Hey, pumpkin, aren't you supposed to be in bed? I wanted to show you my science project, she exclaimed, wriggling out of my arms and tugging me toward the dining room table. A half-constructed solar system, made of painted styrofoam balls, hung from a coat hanger. It's amazing, I said, and the words were genuine. A small island of truth in an ocean of lies. Saturn's rings look perfect. Mom helped me with the glitter, she admitted, beaming. As if summoned, Serafina appeared in the doorway. She was wearing yoga pants and one of my old college t-shirts, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked every bit the devoted wife and mother, the woman I thought I knew. There you are, she said, smiling. I was starting to think you'd moved into the office. She crossed the room and stood on tiptoe to kiss me. It took every ounce of my self-control not to flinch. Her lips, which had once been my harbor, now felt contaminated. Her touch was a brand. Just finishing up the Donovan case, I replied, stepping back subtly. Where's Caleb? Upstairs, playing that video game you got him. I told him 15 more minutes, then lights out. She tilted her head, her gaze analytical. You look tired. Be. Long day, I managed. The understatement of the century. I'm going to grab a shower. Upstairs, I paused by Caleb's room. My 10-year-old son was exactly where she'd said, hunched over his gaming console. He looked up, his face so much like mine lighting up. Dad, I beat level 12. Want to see? I sat beside him, listening as he enthusiastically explained his strategy. Looking at his innocent, excited face, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my wounded pride anymore. This was about my children. They deserved better than a mother who could so casually betray their family. After putting both kids to bed, I stood under a scalding hot shower, as if the water could wash away the filth of the day's revelations. Part of me, the raw, wounded part, wanted to storm into our bedroom and confront her, to watch her face crumble as I laid out her sins. But the investigator in me, the part that had built a career on methodical precision, knew better. An emotional confrontation was a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I needed irrefutable evidence. I needed leverage that would allow me to control the inevitable demolition of our lives. When I emerged, she was already in bed, reading a novel. She patted the space beside her. "Want to watch something? That show you, like, has a new episode." "Not tonight," I said, slipping under the covers and turning away from her. "Like I said, long day." Poor baby," she murmured, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Want a back rub?" "I'm good," I replied, shrugging off her touch as gently as I could. "Just need to sleep." I felt her hesitation, sensed her confusion at my uncharacteristic coolness. After a moment, she returned to her book. A few minutes later, she spoke again, her voice casual. "By the way, I was thinking we could take the kids to that new water park on Saturday. Caleb's been begging to try the big slides. Family day." As if we were a real family, not a sham held together by my silence. "Sure," I replied, my voice muffled by the pillow. "Sounds good." As I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing deepen into the rhythm of sleep, my plan began to take shape. The betrayal had blindsided me, but my response would be anything but impulsive. It would be calculated, thorough, and devastating. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I became the perfect husband, attentive, loving, completely unsuspecting. I brought her flowers just because. I suggested date nights. I made love to her, a mechanical, disconnected act that left me feeling hollowed out, all while pretending everything was normal. I was living inside my own investigation, playing a role while the real me watched from a distance, gathering data. The first piece of my surveillance operation fell into place 3 days after that night in the gym. I took a detour during my lunch break to a small, obscure electronics store across town. I paid cash for a high-end GPS tracker, 2 micro recorders, and a cheap, untraceable burner phone. The tools of my trade now turned against my own life. That evening, while Serafina was busy with the kids' bath time, I slipped out to the garage. The air was cool and smelled of gasoline and cut grass. With a small magnetic case, I attached the GPS tracker to the undercarriage of her SUV. The metallic click was soft, but to me, it sounded as final as a gavel strike. Next came the phone. Sarah was careless with her devices, often leaving her cell on the kitchen counter. It took less than 5 minutes. While she was distracted, I installed a piece of tracking software, a ghost program that would forward all her text messages and call logs to my burner phone. The security pin to unlock her phone was our anniversary date. The irony was a bitter pill I was forced to swallow again and again. The hidden microphones were the trickiest, the move that felt like the deepest violation. I placed one under the driver's seat of her car and another in a side pocket of the purse she used every day. The last one was the hardest. I placed it in our bedroom, tucked behind the heavy oak headboard. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. Had she spoken of me to him? Had she brought him into our home? Into our bed? Each night, after she fell asleep, my real work began. I would slip down to my home office, the house dark and silent around me, and review the day's intelligence. It was exactly like working a case, except the subject was my life and the perpetrator was sleeping peacefully upstairs. A pattern emerged with chilling speed. Serafina's life, once intertwined with mine, now had a secret parallel track that I could see with perfect clarity. She would drop Caleb and Maya at school, then head to her job at the real estate office. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, her routine deviated. Her extended lunch breaks, always explained away as showing a property to a client, invariably led to a small Italian restaurant downtown or a secluded corner of a city park. The GPS tracker was brutally efficient, mapping out the geography of her betrayal. The forwarded texts and call logs painted an even grimmer picture. They were careful, using coded language at first. Lunch meeting confirmed. Can't wait to review the documents. But as the days passed, they grew bolder, more careless. The professional pretense gave way to intimacy. Thinking of you. Last night was amazing. And I listened to the recordings from her car, my stomach clenching with each new revelation. At first, their conversations were mundane office gossip, complaints about their respective workloads. I kept listening, my investigator's patience warring with the husband's agony. I needed more than lunch dates to build an airtight case. Then, on the 5th day of surveillance, I hit pay dirt. It was a recorded conversation from her car, picked up by the microphone under her seat. Julian's voice came through first, smooth and entitled. I miss you. Last night wasn't enough. I know, Sarah replied, and her voice was soft, intimate, a tone I thought had been reserved only for me. But Elias has been acting strange lately, more attentive almost, suspicious. You're being paranoid, Julian dismissed with a condescending laugh. The sound was like acid in my veins. The man's clueless. He's too wrapped up in his precious investigations to notice what's happening under his own roof. Their shared laughter echoed in my silent office. They weren't just betraying me, they were mocking me, delighting in my ignorance. We need to be careful anyway, Sarah insisted. Maybe we should cool it for a while. Are you kidding? Julian sounded genuinely surprised. After what we did in the shower yesterday? Baby, we're just getting started. The shower. My shower. Our shower. The image of them together in our home, in that intimately private space, sent a wave of nausea through me so intense I had to grip the edge of my desk, my head bowed over the trash can. The waiting, the acting, the constant vigilance, it was excruciating. Each day at the office was a performance. I'd make small talk with colleagues like Grant and Owen, who I now knew had been laughing behind my back for months. I'd pass Julian Croft in the hallway, this man who was sleeping with my wife, and I would nod politely, sometimes even discussing the legal aspects of a case with him. He was in his mid-30s, divorced, a known office, Casanova. He wore custom suits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment and possessed a kind of practiced charm that made executives trust him and junior associates swoon. During meetings, I would study him covertly, trying to see what Sarah saw. Was it the confidence, the status, the thrill of the forbidden? What made it all the more galling was that he was good at his job, respected. The perfect corporate citizen, except for the part where he was methodically destroying a colleague's family. 2 weeks into my secret investigation, another significant piece of evidence landed on my burner phone. It was a text from Julian to Sarah. Miss you. Can't wait for Dallas next weekend. No interruptions this time. Dallas. I was scheduled to attend a 3-day insurance fraud conference in Dallas that very weekend. They were getting bolder, more arrogant, perfect. A cold, hard satisfaction settled in my gut. They were about to make a mistake, and I would be there to document every second of it. The text message about Dallas was the linchpin. It was the opportunity I needed to move from surveillance to incontrovertible proof. But first I needed to confirm the location. I needed a name, a room number. For that, I needed to exploit a weak link. The next day, I approached Leland Finch after a budget meeting. Leland was Julian's office mate, a nervous man with thinning hair who always seemed slightly uncomfortable in his own skin. More importantly, he was a known gossip who couldn't keep a secret to save his life. Hey Leland, I said casually as we walked toward the parking lot. I need to check on a property near Westview for a case. Want to ride along? Could use your input on the liability questions. He agreed, clearly flattered by the invitation from a senior investigator. 20 minutes later, we were driving through the suburbs. I waited until we were well away from the office before steering the conversation where I wanted it. You know, I began, my tone light, it's funny. Sarah's been working late a lot recently. Says she's showing houses, but half the time I call the office, she's not there. Leland's discomfort was palpable. He tugged at his collar. Maybe she's out with clients, he suggested weakly. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe she's seeing someone. Leland's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide. What? Why would you think that? I shrugged, the picture of casual unconcern. Just a feeling. Husband's intuition, you could call it. I let the silence hang for a moment before I delivered the final, calculated blow. It's Julian, isn't it? They're sleeping together. I'll bake. The silence in the car was absolute. Leland looked like a cornered animal. How did you? He began, then stopped. I know everything, I lied smoothly. I just want confirmation. After another long pause, the words tumbled out of him in a rushed whisper. The Sunset Motel on Highway 59. That's where they meet. He keeps the room key in his desk drawer, room 118. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Elias. Everyone thought you knew. Thank you for your honesty, Leland, I said, my voice betraying no emotion. I turned the car around and spent the rest of the drive discussing the fictional liability case as if the previous conversation had never happened. With the location confirmed, my next step was clear. I borrowed a high-definition surveillance camera with excellent night vision capabilities from the company's equipment inventory. No one questioned me. It was a routine part of my job. That Thursday morning, I told Sarah I was leaving for the Dallas conference a day early. To get settled in, I explained over breakfast, watching her reaction carefully. I saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes, the brief, almost imperceptible spark of excitement. "Oh," she said, "I thought you weren't leaving until Friday morning." "Change of plans," I replied coolly. The opening keynote was moved up. "Will you call when you arrive?" she asked, the perfect, concerned wife. "The kids will want to say goodnight." Of course, I promised. I'd never forget that. I kissed her goodbye, a chaste peck on the cheek that felt like kissing a marble statue. I embraced my children, holding them a little tighter than usual. Then I loaded my suitcase into the car and drove away. I went exactly 6 blocks, parked in a grocery store lot, and waited. 20 minutes later, her SUV passed by. I gave her another 10 minutes, then circled back to our neighborhood, parking a few houses down with a clear view of our driveway. The wait was agonizing. Hours crawled by. Around noon, her SUV pulled back into the driveway. She emerged, looking flushed and hurried. She went inside and came out 15 minutes later with a small overnight bag. My heart pounded against my ribs as I watched her toss the bag into her car. She checked her appearance in the rearview mirror, applying a fresh coat of lipstick, fluffing her hair, and adjusting her blouse to show a little more cleavage. The premeditated nature of it, the calculated preparation for her tryst, made my stomach churn. I followed her at a safe distance to the Sunset Motel. It was exactly what you'd expect, a single-story sprawl of rooms with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. She parked near room 118, glanced around nervously, and hurried inside. I found a discreet spot in the lot with a view of the room's door. Less than 10 minutes later, a sleek black Audi Julian's car pulled in. He swaggered to the door as if he owned the place and disappeared inside. Grabbing the camera, I made my way to the back of the motel. As I'd hoped, the bathroom window of room 118 was partially open, the cheap blinds not quite reaching the sill. I set up the camera on a small tripod behind a dumpster, adjusting the zoom until I had a partial but clear view into the room. It was enough. I started the recording and returned to my car. The waiting was the hardest part. Sitting there just yards away, knowing what was happening inside that room, my mind tortured me with images I would never be able to unsee. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. Julian emerged first, straightening his tie. He got into his Audi and drove away without a backward glance. 10 minutes later, Sarah appeared, looking disheveled. The sight of it sent a surge of pure, cold rage through me. Once she was gone, I retrieved the camera. I didn't watch the footage. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a hotel on the other side of town and checked in under the company account, cementing my Dallas alibi. That night, I called home as promised. "How was the drive?" she asked, her voice warm and maternal. "Fine," I replied. Traffic was light. I spoke with Caleb and Maya, their innocent voices a painful reminder of what was at stake. When Sarah came back on the line, she said, "Love you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You too," I managed, and hung up. Alone in the anonymous hotel room, I finally connected the camera to my laptop. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. I fast-forwarded through most of it, unable to stomach the details, but I watched enough to see them embrace, to see them move toward the bed. It was all there. The final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I saved the file to an encrypted drive, then closed the laptop. Strangely, I felt nothing. Not rage, not despair. Just a cold, clear purpose. The hard part was over. Now came the reckoning. I returned home Sunday evening, playing the role of the oblivious husband to perfection. Sarah was solicitous, asking about the conference, listening attentively to my fabricated accounts of panels and networking events. That night, she wore a silky nightgown I'd never seen before and tried to initiate intimacy. "I missed you," she murmured, running her hands up my chest. I gently disentangled myself. "I'm pretty beat," I said. "Rain check?" A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "You've been beat a lot lately." "Just work stress," I assured her. The lie came easily. I had become as adept at deception as she was. Monday morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. At 8 a.m. sharp, I requested a meeting with Sterling Hayes, the company's executive vice president and my direct supervisor. Sterling was old school, a former Marine with a zero-tolerance policy for dishonesty. "I need to discuss a sensitive matter," I said, closing his office door behind me. "It concerns Julian Croft." End of. For the next 30 minutes, I laid out my case methodically, professionally. I started with the personal, presenting the evidence of the affair, key text messages, GPS data mapping their meetings at the Sunset Motel, and finally, a single, damning still image from the video footage. Sterling listened without interruption, his face an impassive mask. "That's a hell of a situation, Elias," he said when I'd finished. "I'm sorry you're going through this." "Thank you, sir," I replied. "But there's more." This was the gamble. I pulled out a second file. "I believe Julian may be involved in something irregular with the West Side development claims." I laid out the financial discrepancies. I'd uncovered 5 claims, all handled by Julian, all settled for amounts significantly higher than our standard matrix would indicate, all paid to shell companies that traced back to a single holding corporation. A corporation owned by a developer who was a regular in Julian's golf foursome. Sterling's expression hardened. He stared at the documents, then at me. After a long moment, he pressed his intercom button. "Janet, cancel my 10. And ask Julian Croft, Leland Finch, and..." He looked at me questioningly. "Serafina Vance, from Premier Realty," I supplied. "And Serafina Vance, from Premier Realty, to come to my office immediately. Tell them it's urgent." The 20 minutes we waited passed in tense silence. When they finally filed into the office, the confusion on their faces was palpable. Sarah spotted me first, her expression shifting from puzzlement to alarm. Julian entered next, all swagger and confidence, followed by a visibly terrified Leland Finch. "Mr. Croft," Sterling began, his voice formal, "are you familiar with our company's policy regarding disclosure of personal relationships?" Julian blinked, thrown by the question. "Of course, sir." "And have you made any such disclosures recently?" Julian's eyes darted to Sarah. "No, sir. I haven't had any relationships requiring disclosure." Sterling then turned his computer monitor around, showing the still image from the motel. The room went silent. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Julian's face darkened with rage. "You've been spying on us," he sputtered, glaring at me. "I've been investigating," I corrected calmly. "It's what I do." "Mr. Croft," Sterling interrupted, his voice like steel. "The nature of your personal relationship is frankly the least of my concerns." He pushed the file with the financial discrepancies across the desk. "I'm more interested in your explanation for these settlement patterns." As Julian fumbled through increasingly weak justifications, I watched Sarah. She was a statue, her face ashen. It was then that Leland, still standing by the door, seemed to make a decision. "Mr. Hayes," he interjected, his voice trembling. I think I should mention that I've been aware of some irregularities. Julian asked me to alter some of the damage assessments on those properties." "Shut up, Leland," Julian hissed. "That's enough," Sterling snapped. He looked at Julian, his eyes filled with contempt. "Mr. Croft, consider yourself suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building." Julian stood, his face contorted with fury. "This is a setup. He's just doing this because he can't keep his wife satisfied." I didn't react. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. As security escorted a still protesting Julian out of the office, Sterling turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his tone softening slightly, "you're free to go. We may need to speak with you again as the investigation progresses." She rose on unsteady legs, paused at the door, and looked back at me, her eyes pleading. "We'll talk at home," I said quietly. The words were a promise and a threat. After she left, Sterling looked at me. "Go home, Elias. Deal with your personal situation. That's an order." As I gathered my things, I could feel the stares of my colleagues, hear the whispers spreading through the office like wildfire. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't care. Let them talk. The story had changed. I was no longer the fool. I was the man who had exposed the truth. The drive home was slow, deliberate. Each red light was a moment to breathe, to brace myself for the final act of this painful drama. When I arrived, Sarah's SUV was already in the driveway. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of her, her makeup streaked with tears. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Long enough," I replied, remaining standing. "About 3 weeks." "Endo. And you've been spying on me? Following me?" Her tone held a note of accusation, as if I were the one in the wrong. "I've been gathering evidence," I corrected, my voice unnervingly calm. "You humiliated me in front of your boss." "Like you privately humiliated me in front of my entire office for months?" I countered. Everyone knew, Sarah. Everyone except me. She flinched. I made a mistake, Elias. Please, we can work through this. For the kids. The kids, I echoed. Yes, let's talk about them. What were you planning to tell them when you eventually left me for Julian? A man who, by the way, is now the subject of a major fraud investigation. Good judgment there, Sarah. Really top-notch. Her face paled. Is that true? About the fraud? Yes. He'll probably face criminal charges. She started crying again. A softer, more desperate sound now. What happens now? It was the question I had been asking myself for weeks. The initial fiery rage had cooled, forged into something harder, more resolute. Now, I said calmly, you pack your things and leave. Her head snapped up. What? You heard me. This house, this marriage, it's over. I want you gone by the time the kids get home from school. You can't just throw me out, she protested. This is my home too. The kids will stay with me, I stated firmly. You can see them on weekends. Supervised visits, until I'm confident you won't try to poison them against me. That's not fair, she whispered. I'm their mother. And I'm their father, I replied. A father who hasn't betrayed his family. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, panic creeping into her voice. That's not my problem anymore, I said, turning toward the stairs. I'm going to pack your essential things. You can arrange to get the rest later. Elias, please, she begged, following me. 15 years. 2 children. You can't just throw that away. I stopped on the stairs and looked down at her, at the woman who had shared my life in my bed, now a stranger pleading in the ruins she had created. I didn't, I said quietly. You did. The moment you decided our vows meant so little, you could risk it all for Julian Croft. I went upstairs and pulled 2 suitcases from the closet. Methodically, I began packing her clothes, folding sweaters and blouses, with a detached efficiency. She hovered in the doorway, alternating between tears, pleas, and flashes of anger. What about everything I've done for this family? She demanded at one point. I gave up my career to raise your children. It counted for everything, I replied, not looking up. Until you decided to throw it all away for some cheap thrills with a man who was using you. He wasn't using me. He cared about me. He used you to get his rocks off while he embezzled company funds. I corrected brutally. Did you notice how quickly he distanced himself from you in Sterling's office? That's the man you destroyed your family for. She had no answer to that. When I'd finished, I carried the suitcases downstairs and placed them by the front door. I checked my watch. The kids will be home in an hour. I suggest you be gone by then. Can I at least say goodbye to them? She asked, her voice small. You can call them tonight, I said finally. I'll explain that you're staying with a friend for a while. I grabbed my keys, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of what had once been my happy home. I did love you, you know, she said quietly as I reached for the doorknob. I still do. I turned to look at her one last time. No, I said simply. You don't know the meaning of the word. I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. In my car, I sat for a moment, expecting to feel grief or regret. But there was only a sense of finality, of a chapter closing. The betrayal had changed me, hardened something inside that would never quite soften again. But I wasn't broken. I drove to pick up my children from school, ready to face whatever came next. The following weeks were a blur of lawyers, logistics, and difficult conversations. As predicted, Julian Croft was fired from Sterling Assurance once the fraud investigation confirmed my suspicions. Criminal charges were pending. The office gossip machine churned, but to my surprise, most of my colleagues rallied around me. Grant and Owen, in particular, went out of their way to be supportive, their actions tinged with an unspoken guilt. Sarah moved in with her sister temporarily. Our divorce proceedings began, her position weakened by the irrefutable evidence of her affair and her connection to Julian's legal troubles. My attorney was confident we'd get the outcome we wanted: primary custody of the kids, the house, and a fair financial settlement. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Caleb and Maya. With the help of a child psychologist, I found the words, emphasizing that both their parents loved them, even if we couldn't live together anymore. But why can't Mom live here? Maya had asked, her lower lip trembling. Mom and I have grown apart, I'd explained carefully. Sometimes adults change and can't be married anymore. But we will both always be your parents, and we will both always love you. Caleb, at 10, was more perceptive. It's because she was with that man from your office, isn't it? He asked one night as I tucked him in. I heard Aunt Lisa talking about it on the phone. I hugged him tightly, marveling at his resilience. Yes, buddy, that's part of it. But the important thing is that we're going to be okay. All of us. 1 month after Sarah moved out, I received an unexpected visitor at the office. Brandon Hudson, Julian's developer friend and partner in crime. He wanted to apologize, he said, and to offer a warning. I've turned state's evidence against Julian, he admitted. But I wanted you to know, he's been trying to contact your wife again, claiming you framed him, that they can still be together once this is all cleared up. The information was chilling. That evening, I got a text from Sarah. We need to talk about Julian, please. We met at a public coffee shop the next day. She looked thinner, exhausted. She told me Julian had become erratic, harassing her for money, demanding she testify against me. She was scared. Then she did something I never expected. She pushed a small flash drive across the table. He was recording our conversations, she said, tears in her eyes, planning to use them against you. It's all on here. Things he said about the fraud, about how he was just using me to get at company information. I want to do one right thing, to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. I took the flash drive, a peace offering from the ruins of our marriage. Her remorse seemed genuine, but it didn't change anything. I'm sorry for what he did to you, I said. But that doesn't change what you did to us. I know, she whispered. I don't expect forgiveness. The flash drive proved invaluable, sealing Julian's fate and strengthening my position in the divorce. 3 months after that meeting, Julian Croft pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. A week later, our divorce was finalized. The night after the divorce was made official, I sat on the back porch of what was now solely my house. I watched Caleb and Maya chase fireflies in the twilight, their laughter echoing in the humid evening air. My phone buzzed with a text from Sterling Hayes. Board approved your promotion to Director of Investigations. Congratulations. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in months. A weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying lifted from my shoulders. The journey had been agonizing, the revelations devastating, but I had survived. More than survived. I'd emerged stronger, more aware, more determined than ever to build the life my children deserved. Dad, Maya called, racing toward me with her hands cupped. Look what I found. She opened her palms to reveal a tiny green frog. He was hiding under the swing, she explained excitedly. Can we keep him? Caleb rolled his eyes but leaned in, curious. We should probably let him go, I said gently, pulling her into a one-armed hug. He has his own family to get back to. Maya considered this, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but can we make him a little house first, in case he wants to visit? I think that's a great idea, I replied. As the kids busied themselves creating a miniature frog habitat near the garden, I leaned back in my chair and looked up at the star-dusted sky. The future wasn't the one I had planned, but it was mine to shape. Mine and my children's. And for the first time in a long, long time, that felt not just acceptable, but full of possibility.